Welcome to The Hidden World of Women, a podcast brought to you by Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. My name is Emma and I'll be your host for today's episode.
Hello. Today I'm joined by our online learning coordinator for Hidden World of You. I'm joined by Kate. Kate is an all-round amazing woman in general. She is a mum of two beautiful children, a wife, a daughter, a sister, an auntie, and did I mention that she's absolutely fantastic? And I'm very appreciative of her being here to speak with me today. Kate, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks for having me.
So if you happen to hear a previous episode, which was around perinatal mental health, and it was two people sharing their stories of their experiences with perinatal mental health, that was recorded at our PNDA symposium, and Kate emceed that event. And throughout the whole event, Kate kept saying, "Do you want to hear my birth story?" I'll share my birth story. And it sort of became a bit of a running joke. And then today we've had somebody who has not turned up for their interview. And so Kate is saving me by being a guest for our podcast. And part of that will be finally sharing the birth story.
That's what everyone wants to hear.
Yay! And I think it's useful. I think one of the things that we learned as part of that symposium was that actually people's birth stories really impact them, they impact who they are as a person, and they impact who they are as a parent as well.
Massively. I think when Valerie spoke, even though I've had two births of my own and I know my own story, it wasn't until I heard the way Valerie explained that I realised how much of a difference that makes to the rest of our story and going on that adventure of being a mum. That initial starting out, that birth story really does determine a lot more than I initially had thought about.
So why do you think that is?
I think, especially for your first birth, it just shapes, you immediately change. You go from being Kate, not a mum, to this person that you've just experienced something that you no amount of reading books or people telling you what it's like can actually explain it to you. And I wish that if I had known to speak about it more, maybe with my midwives and doctors, that then my next steps into motherhood may have felt a little bit more confident or a little more settled. I think you go from being pregnant and you know that that's what's coming. You're going to have to give birth. It's inevitable. It's what you have to do.
It's got to come out one way or the other, right?
You're going to be pregnant for the rest of your life.
Which that last month feels like you're going to be pregnant forever anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But then you go so quickly from this massive experience physically to right now I'm mum and I've got to feed this baby and not sleep anymore and all of those things. Whereas if that happened in any other situation, and your body went through something, I'm going to say traumatic. I know it's a beautiful and amazing, but it's a huge thing to happen. It's the only experience in life where I can think you wouldn't address it.
Yeah.
If you had a car accident, you talk about the car accident, how that made you feel.
Yeah.
Not that I'm comparing giving birth to an accident, but in a lot of ways, your body physically changes.
Yeah.
So I wish that I'd given that a bit more thought. Or
even my children were born via Caesar, and my mum, not too long before I had my first baby, she'd had to have a hysterectomy. And because of the reasons behind that, she'd had to have basically the same surgery as a cesarean, but as a hysterectomy.
Yeah.
So it wasn't keyhole. They, basically cut her across and, that kind of thing. She had 6 weeks off work. And then, so I remember that her and Dad would walk around the house every day as part of her exercise, but he waited on her hand and foot.
Yeah.
I had a Caesar. And I was on my own looking after a child.
Second or third baby.
Yeah.
I read that baby. That toddler's there as well.
That's it.
Looking after.
And, exactly, because when you've got your first one, they do sleep, hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, they sleep for some of the time. You get to rest. But when you've got a second or third that you're running around after the older ones as well, there's no time to rest after having a Caesar.
Exactly.
So, it's a very different kind of thing. But just as you were talking, I was like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
All of this attention that she got, whereas for me it was like, oh, well, suck it up. You got a baby to look after now.
If you're lucky, you get a few nights in the hospital. But, then even that, you're home, you're straight into it. Right, how do I, A, B, and C, to all the next things that come with that.
So going back to that, now you have two children and you had two very different births with those children.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is for me, as a control freak, I'm only learning how much of a control freak I am since becoming a mother. My first birth was actually far more dangerous for me and my baby, but my second birth was far more traumatic for me. For the doctors and my husband and my mum who were in the room, they say they have such a different perspective on it. So my first birth, I've got big babies. They were 4.4 and 4.3 kilos.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so big babies. And my son, my first birth was, what's back-to-back? Posterior. So, you know.
That is so painful.
Oh, so painful.
Mm-hmm.
And epidural that didn't work, all of the things that you are sure, people say you have an epidural, doesn't work. I'm like, no, that won't be me. It will work. I know it will work. All of that sort of stuff. But it took a long time. So everything felt gradual, and I didn't realise at the time I felt in control of it, but it didn't feel rushed.
Yeah.
So even though I had to push a long time, and then I had some assistance, so I had to have an episiotomy, and he was vacuumed out. For me, I saw the doctor there. Knew I had lots of nurses. I felt like, oh, everyone knows what's going on.
I'm being held here.
I'm being held,
yeah.
Right? So I'm just going to leave this to the experts. A lot of pain, all that sort of stuff. But I remember the feeling of my son being put on my chest. You can't say that without getting emotional.
I know.
Like, oh,
yeah.
God. But I remember that feeling, and me just.
And he's nearly 9 now.
He's nearly 9.
And still that moment of having them put on your chest. It's
like
still.
it was this morning.
Yeah.
Like it was this morning. And just this feeling of it'll be okay. He's okay. Hugely powerful. But I remember looking at my husband, who is, you know, a gentle giant, all of those things, but tears in his eyes. My mum, I remember her just disappearing for a period of time, which turns out now was her going, you need to get a doctor in here because something's not right. So a lot of pushing, ended up with a fractured tailbone because I was pushing for so long. All of those things that afterwards I go, oh, yeah, okay, I can see why they were worried. But for me, there was time, so I didn't realise quite what was going on.
Yeah.
Whereas my second daughter, which again I should have known, she was a cyclone. She was born a cyclone. I went from being at home to, I don't want to, you know, drop my son off too early. I don't want to put people out. So I think we dropped him off at about 6 o'clock. By about 10 o'clock, I went, yeah, we should probably go to hospital. I think we got to the hospital at 11, and by 1:45, I'd delivered her.
Oh.
So it just felt they put a thing in my hand to see if I could have an epidural to do a test for that. They butchered that, so my hand was fat and swollen. And then I remember just saying, I have to push, like I still had my tights on the hospital in. And it was just, to me, it was horrific. And I was yelling at the doctor saying, you know, you're going to have to cut, you're going to have to do all of those things. And that I don't know if it's trauma, but that memory that I wasn't expecting came back from my first delivery. And I remember the doctor saying to me, no, you're not going to have to do that. It's all okay. We've got it under control. But having experienced that the first time, it was a very interesting reaction that I had. So same thing, I delivered her, she was put onto my chest, but I did not have that feeling of calm. I was shaking, my whole body was shaking. I was given 2 Panadol for the afterbirth pains, and I just thought, what has happened? What has happened? And I was home.
How much do you think those 2 Panadol helped?
Yeah. Well, they would have helped 50 minutes before when I was, you know, not getting an epidural because it happened so quickly. And I just think that, you know, I ended up, I just didn't feel calm. I didn't feel that sense of ease. I was home after 12 hours.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd left at 5 p.m. and by 12 lunchtime the next day I was back home. And, you know, there's lots of things that happen with the second child, but I slept very differently. Well, I didn't sleep. And I think, you know, then that turned into postnatal anxiety. And I wonder now, after hearing Valerie speak, if I'd been more aware of the impact of my birth, would that have changed things? I always thought I'd have more children, but after that I still say, no, I couldn't do that again.
But I wonder, so as much as it was your second labour that you felt you were spinning out of control, do you think some of that was because it was left over from the first?
Definitely.
And you hadn't realised that you'd experienced that. Nobody had taken time to actually talk. And, you know, that thought of you fractured your tailbone. Did you have any support for that after you had him?
No, I had to go to the doctor to say, look, I can't sit down. What's happening? And so then they did the x-rays and said, oh, yeah, there's a fracture in there, so we'll put some cortisone in there. But I still, to this day, have issues where I go, oh, I've been sitting on that. Or I'll see certain types of chairs and go, nah, can't sit on that chair for too long.
But these are the things that we don't talk about for motherhood.
Exactly.
You know, people talk about that after you have a baby, you may experience light bladder leakage or something like that.
You invite me to bounce, and I am feeling nervous. And like you said, my oldest is 9. Like, why is that not? Light bladder leakage is not what it is. It's not explained, you know, like everyone's different. But I just think some of the things that should be conversations are just really brushed over quite quickly. And
even with that, it is an episode that I'm hoping to do as a future episode for the podcast, that, you know, there are physios and women's physios that you can go to try and support, but there's just this normalisation of light bladder leakage, whatever that means for different people.
Yeah.
Which for some people is light bladder leakage, and for other people, I was talking to someone the other day, and she was saying, I used to teach belly dancing going back quite a while ago, and she had experienced incontinence since her child was born, and she came to my classes when she was in her 60s.
Yep.
So she'd had incontinence for about 40 years. And she didn't, when she was coming to classes, she said all of a sudden she started to, you know, her continence started to improve. She didn't think that had been possible, but because of coming to belly dancing and some of the different exercises that we were doing, that kind of thing, all of a sudden it started to improve. Nobody had told her that it was possible for that to improve.
Exactly. I started working at Women's Health when my youngest, I think, was just under 12 months. And I honestly think if I hadn't started working here, I wouldn't have had the conversations around postnatal anxiety that I have had as a result of working with psychologists and counsellors every day and going, oh, okay, maybe I don't need to feel like that.
And where we do talk about these kinds of things openly.
It's lunchroom conversation.
Yeah. A hallway conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it, because it isn't behind closed doors. No. We will talk. Yeah, I mean, unfortunate for people who come in, we will talk about anything, anywhere.
Anything. I'll stand on the stage and offer to tell my birth story. 100%. And I think that, those conversations, like my obstetrician for the second birth, after I said to him, after I'd had delivered my daughter, I said to him, I was so shocked, I didn't expect that reaction. And he acknowledged that he knew that was going to be a strong reaction for me. And he's a beautiful doctor, but I think to myself,
why didn't you tell me?
Why didn't we have these conversations when I was pregnant?
Yeah. And I think it's a hard line. You know, when you're talking to somebody who's pregnant, I guess I probably share a lot more than perhaps other women may share because of, you know, I've been working in women's health for 18 years. So, you know, I was talking to somebody who she's due to have a baby any day, and was talking about kind of the bleeding that happens after you have a baby. And she was like, what?
Yeah.
Nobody told me about that.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, thank goodness you told me. I would have thought I was dying. So, you know, knew that it might happen while she was in the hospital, but not that it could last for weeks afterwards.
Exactly. And if you know that that's a thing that can occur, you're aware of what, you know, what needs attention and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And just so many little things that.
But I think I will still, so as much as I do overshare with potential new, you know, parents to be, I will still pull back. You don't share everything because you don't want to scare them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think we have a responsibility to let people know that that these things could potentially happen. So, you know, your doctor knew that there was a possibility that you could have this strong reaction. Why didn't he tell you that? Because then you could have been prepared.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that desire to have a second child was strong enough that it overrode.
Well, also, by the time you get to your obstetrician, you're already pregnant. Yeah. So, well, we're in it now, honey.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it really surprised me that I typically think I'm pretty aware of my emotions, but I will never forget that feeling of getting to the hospital and just looking at him with fear of just feeling like, no, this isn't how it's meant to go. And had I maybe addressed or spoken more openly about my first birth story, I might have realised the ramifications that has. So yeah, I don't know. It's I just think everyone that has the opportunity to talk about their birth story should, whether that be with your midwife or your doctor or your friend or your mum, whoever, because everybody's birth story is different and everybody's birth story deserves to be told.
And heard. That's it.
And we think that, you know, women give birth every day, blah, 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 but bugger that, because every birth is different and it's your own personal experience.
Yeah.
And you have the right to feel however you feel about that and be supported in that. So
And I think as well that, like when I had my first baby, who's 16 and a half now, but back then there were spaces where you could share your birth stories.
Yeah.
So there were lots of spaces where you could write them, and you could read other people's birth stories, things like that. Whereas we don't, to my knowledge, we don't have that. I couldn't find it when I was pregnant with my youngest. So.
And I think even like mothers groups, I think back to my mother's group that I went to with my first child, and it was much more about how is baby going? What are you going to do for baby?
Are you going to breastfeed? Are you going to bottle feed?
Are you going to do that? And I was so swept up in, because my children were both bottle fed after, a fairly horrific attempt at breastfeeding. And I carried so much guilt with that, so much guilt, that I just now look and I think about me as this new mum. Again, I could get emotional. This new mum that's just gone through this whole life-changing experience, and all I can think about is how I'm not doing enough because I'm bottle feeding him. And I just think that's not what the focus should have been on.
No.
It should have been on how are you going, how was your experience, how are you feeling now? And that saying of if mum's okay, baby's going to be okay is just, there's so much truth to that. And if mum's not doing okay, we really need to ask why.
Yeah, and I think that definition of what's okay, I think
because to me, if my baby was okay, I was okay, but that's not true. That's not realistic. If you're crying every time you're trying to feed your baby, you need help, you need support. And for partners as well, like, God bless my husband, is the beautiful, supportive space, but it's his first baby too. He doesn't know, and he doesn't know how I'm feeling. It's just this whole new experience for everybody. And having a spot or a space, like you were saying, with your older daughter, I think there's so much value to that. And for,
But for all of that, so, I was, because I do, like I said, I do overshare with parents, and I was talking to somebody who was saying that when she was feeding her baby, she was like banging her foot on the floor to try and, cause pain in her foot to take away from the immense pain that she was feeling in her boob.
Yeah.
And, and somebody else was in the room going, oh, yeah, it's hard, isn't it? And I'm like, oh, no, we need to, that's not normal.
That's the conversation I had. Oh, yeah, it's hard, isn't it? It's difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas I can remember, I can still feel it, just my whole body tensing up going, I don't want to do this. And that's, you don't want to not.
I think there's a difference. No, there's a difference between going, you know what, for the first couple of days after you have your baby, you are likely to experience some after pains. And so that's, the uterus contracts as you're feeding. That is normal, and it can really hurt for the first, short amount of time, but that will go away.
See, that just doesn't, in my experience 9 years ago, that's not what was happening. It was about ways to hold your baby, and so everybody had a different way of holding the baby, and it's just information overload. Yeah. Whereas if there are just tips, just something that I don't have to think about, just going, look, that is going to hurt, but this is why it's hurting. This is why it's hurting,
and this is when you should expect it to stop. And when you're first feeding a baby, for the first couple of days, it's going to hurt because your boobs aren't used to this. Yeah. And so, yes, you'll end up with cracked nipples, but you can use this cream, or you can use nipple shields. That's it.
I've got enough other stuff that I'm trying to think about. Give me some solutions.
Give me some solutions and tell me that there's an end in sight, because if there's no end in sight, then this is not going to go well for anyone.
I try and do that now, even when people are talking about their kids. And it's this constant building block competition of, we'll just wait till they're teenagers, or just this, just that. That's not helpful.
No.
Please stop doing that. Yeah. And especially to a new mum who is so sleep deprived.
Oh, like when you hear somebody who goes, you'll miss those cuddles when they're older. Oh. Well, maybe, but right now I want to be able to pee without a child in my arms.
That's right. So could you tell me how to do that?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
That's it. So perhaps give me a hint about how I can put them in a rocker so I can put them down for 3 minutes to manage to wee.
I feel guilty about that. I was chatting to a new mum the other day who was saying she felt so bad because she'd had to put her baby in the bouncer. I was like, what? That is good parenting. You go to the toilet and your baby is safe. You are fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's exactly. And it's really difficult. But you said before that you wish that you'd had more opportunity to talk to your obstetrician or talk to your midwife. What kind of things do you think that you would have found to be useful to talk to them about?
That's a good question. I think a bit like you were saying before, in terms of give me a reason as to why this is happening and maybe something that I can try with the breastfeeding. I think the same thing. You know, we go into our midwives or our doctors and we fill out the scales about how we're feeling. Not always an accurate reflection, because we're thinking, I don't want to come across as though I'm not coping, all of those kind of things. I think maybe if they'd been able to ask me some different questions, that might have spurred some conversation on.
Yeah.
Because even now, 9 years later, I can still burst into tears talking about breastfeeding my son, who, you know, chews down a Big Mac quicker than like, clearly breastfeeding is not something that I'm worried about with him now, but that feeling is still so fresh in my mind. And had those conversations maybe been started, I think even gauging my reaction would have helped them. And it just doesn't feel like that's what really happened.
So even just having your obstetrician or midwife say to you, how was your previous birth? Like, and I think often people look at the outcomes of it. So I remember when I had all 3 of my children going through the, you know, how many pregnancies have you had? How many live births have you had? That was probably about as, and was it a natural birth or was it cesarean? That was probably as much as they asked me.
Detail.
Yeah. So there was no, take 5 minutes and sit down and tell me what happened.
And yeah, that's so true. And just, like I say, I can remember detail after detail of my son and my daughter's birth, and you feel like you don't want to take up people's time sharing that, but had I think my second birth could have been far different. I could have been much more prepared. I would have got to the hospital earlier. I wouldn't have felt like I was bothering people, and it would have, I needed to know in myself that is a trait that I have. I like to be in a controlled environment and not be apologetic for that, whereas I should have had the confidence. I was so passive in my births that I wish now, if I could go back in time, I would have said, look, this is what I need to make it feel okay for me. And I would have, you know, you get that call, you ring the midwife, and it's like, no, you're not ready. You're not ready. Whereas if I'd been able to have a plan with my obstetrician earlier, I could have discussed that and how does that look and how can we make it so that I feel safe. Because by the time I got to the hospital, I did not feel safe. And that's something I think now, why did I let myself lose that right? Everyone has that right to feel okay in that situation. So, but they're only things that I can know with experience.
When I was pregnant with my first baby, I was working here at the time, and we happened to have a midwife who was a student counsellor here. And she said to me, and it stuck with me for this whole time, but she said to me, don't ever call a doctor doctor. Call them by their first name. Don't ever put a doctor in a position of power over you. In that relationship, you're the person who has to make the decision. Don't put somebody else in that. Don't give somebody else your power. And it really stuck with me, and I use that now, and we spend way too much time having to go and visit doctors. But I think that does really come in handy.
Usually, because I automatically am on the back step. Like I don't want to waste their time. Their time is valuable. All of those things that I think. But in that situation, I agree with you completely. If I'd had that mindset, I wonder how it would have gone. And I wonder how my relationship with my baby would have started out.
So with you saying that, what do you think you would have done differently? So when you said, you know, you would have gone and you would have asked for things so that you could, what do you think you would have asked for?
I would have liked to have had more of a conversation around pain relief, because for me, you know, each to their own and power to someone. And if that's something that is hugely important to you, I think absolutely power to you. But for me, I had no opposition to pain relief. And for that to all happen so quickly, my body just went into shock. I could barely hold my daughter because I was shaking so much afterwards. So I would have liked to have had a chat around how pain relief could look versus the first time that it happened. And also for me, I wish that conversation around my first birth had been brought up, because my son was stuck for so long, that I pushed for so long that I then had the tailbone injury. Had I clicked with what that actually could mean for my second delivery, I could have had a conversation with them about how is that going to look and what can we do to prevent that happening again. So just little things like that as someone who's not medically trained, I don't think I would have had the foresight to think about that. So I think those things could have been really beneficial.
And you said that you were shaking so much you couldn't hold your baby. And then I think you mentioned that you didn't get much sleep after she was born.
Yeah, about 5 years.
Any day now, any day. So how do you think that did impact the relationship that you had with her?
Hugely. I've only, to be honest, really, this podcast is going to go in a direction I didn't think it was going to go.
If you don't want it to go there, we can steer it back.
I love talking about myself. Only recently I went and did bit hippy-dippy, but hypnotherapy for myself for anxiety, and conversations that came up in that really I didn't expect to gain anything from. I realised how much guilt I carried around for probably 6 years, and she's still 6, with how I felt I was failing her constantly. And that's not fair. That's not fair on me. It's not fair on her. No. And she and I have got a beautiful relationship, and she's just the best little thing I've ever met.
She's a firecracker.
She's a total firecracker, and she's everything that I want a little girl to have. But I just carried this guilt about why can't she sleep? What could I do to make her feel more settled? And as she's getting older, I'm realising a lot of these things are just...
That's just her.
Just her.
Yeah.
And, I just think I carried so much guilt unnecessarily. And sleep deprivation just doesn't allow you to see things clearly. Yeah.
I think that mum guilt... It's universal. I don't know how we stop it, but I think it doesn't matter what you do, there's always mum guilt. So, I certainly experienced it because I couldn't have a natural birth. And so you think, well, how can I fail at something that, like, literally that's what women are made to do, and I can't do it.
And that's the difficult thing too, is when you're in the position and you carry that guilt, it's so heavy.
Yeah.
But for the outside people, I can look and just think, I just think it's amazing that you were able to, that your body could have 3 C-sections, So if you're not in that situation yourself, it's really easy to just go, oh no, don't worry.
Yeah.
But that then takes that, like a bit like the birth story, that's your own story to hold, and that guilt is your own feeling to process.
Yeah,
it's
that's
just how we process it. I don't know.
And how do we give people space to be able to process it? Because it's all well and good, as you say, that the guilt doesn't serve a purpose. Feeling guilty because you couldn't breastfeed your children, feeling guilty because you couldn't give birth naturally to your children. It doesn't serve anything, but it's still there. So it's still this society's message. And I had this, great idea that I was going to be one of those mums that there's no way I was going to have any pain relief, and I was going to, all of that. And now I look at it and think, well, that's just insane. Like, why would you choose to go through that when there's all of these options available?
Yeah.
Like, what was I thinking? It was a long time ago. I was very young. I wasn't that young, but still, but we still, there's just this society's expectations, and it doesn't matter what you do, nobody can live up to them. Somebody actually said something recently that I thought was, I'm going to try and hold on to, that anytime I feel guilty about something, anytime I start to have concerns about, my body image or my, ability to parent, that kind of thing, I need to remember that somewhere a rich white man is getting richer by my insecurities.
So true.
And I need to just go, do you know what? This is serving him and not me, and I need to let it go.
Yes,
so
take the money out of his pocket.
That's it, and put it back into my self-esteem bank. So I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know how else we stop this mum guilt.
I don't know. But I must admit, speaking to this hypnotherapist, I honestly feel like she was the first person that asked me, straight up asked me, do you feel guilty about your birth? Do you feel guilty that your daughter didn't sleep? And I would just burst into tears. And it's been the weirdest feeling though, because I feel like that weight lifted. Yeah. Because I just thought, why am I feeling that way? Who is that serving? It's not serving me. It's not serving her. Yeah. So I harp on about this all the time. You're saying that you'll ask questions or overshare. I've really become that person that harps on about tell me a story.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's just so true. There's so much value to it, a shared story and a shared problem. It just serves such a good purpose.
Yeah. And that's it. It's just around creating that space for people. So going on, your daughter didn't sleep for quite some time.
When she was a newborn, she slept probably in about 2.5 hour blocks. But then it was that I don't want to get sued, but there's an app that tells you about growth spurts that your children go
Oh,
through.
yeah.
And so I kept looking, and for some people it works amazingly, and I kept looking thinking, right, well, the next one she'll sleep, and the next one she'll sleep. And she didn't. And she just, even when she got to kindy, we were like, this is it, this is going to tire her out, she'll sleep. And she still doesn't.
Yeah.
She'll still pop her head in during the middle of the night and just be like, oh, what are you doing? Like, go back to bed.
Why are you not asleep?
That's right. And I met another school mum who, I think that also helped as well, again, with the shared story.
Yeah.
But her daughter was a couple of years older and just going, oh, no, she doesn't sleep.
Yeah.
Like, that's just her.
Yeah.
I've taken her to paediatricians, I've taken her to psychs, all these different things.
Yeah.
No, that's just her. And
Yeah.
that shared story just made me go, oh, maybe it's not something that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So
when I had my first, she lulled me into a total false sense of security.
yes,
You know,
so did mine.
my first
And that
slept
was
through the
'cause I
night.
did it.
Yeah, that's
The
it.
books
Yeah.
had him on some stupid timetable that didn't make any difference. He
No.
just was going to sleep.
Yeah, but I didn't know that. So I
Yeah.
thought I was a great parent. Like, I was rocking it. By 5 weeks old, she was sleeping through the night.
Oh, yeah,
6
same.
weeks old, she was sleeping through the night.
Yeah. And I think my mum and sister, who are far more experienced at mothering, must have just been laughing at me when I would say, no, he's just on a routine.
I didn't have the routine, but my goodness, she could sleep.
Yeah.
And she would sleep anywhere.
But could she still sleep now?
Yes.
Same with my son.
Yeah.
He used to
And
sleep like a log.
she was the kid who, you know, we'd be out somewhere and at 6 o'clock she'd be saying to us, Mummy, I need to go home
Yeah.
because it's my bedtime at 7 o'clock. And even now, she's 16, but she's not a teenager that stays up all night.
Mm.
Like, she will be, at 9 o'clock, she's coming in to say goodnight.
Yeah.
And by 9:30, she's asleep.
Yeah. I honestly, truly believe we're born with our personalities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, I just don't think it's our job to change them. But when it's sleep involved, it comes to sleep, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I remember somebody saying to me, you know, because my second child, my son, he was a challenging child, we'll say. I remember somebody saying to me who had experienced similar things. She said, you know, I love my children when they're awake, but at night time I just stand in the door and I just top up my love tank. Just, you know, I remember saying the same, you know, I love my children when they're awake. I just love them that little bit more when they're sleeping, which is hard when he won't go to sleep.
You're making this really difficult.
That's it. My love tank is getting very empty.
Do you still do that now, though? Is this, you know, with a 16-year-old, do you look at her when she sleeps?
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking that the other night as I was watching my son, and I thought, I wonder how long I'll want
Yeah.
to do that for.
I think it's creepy if I break into their house when they're 27 and I'm still
reckon?
doing it. But at the moment, yeah, I'll still
I just
go.
wanted to watch you sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I still do that. I still watch my kids sleep.
Yeah. And I do find it does help top
Mm.
up the love tank.
Yeah.
And it helps a lot when they're actually sleeping in order to be able to top it up.
Yeah.
Mm. But how did you find that the lack of sleep, do you think that added to the guilt? Do you think that added to your,
Big time.
you know,
I think
your capacity
that's-
to function? Was that impacted?
Yes, hugely. And because you've got different streams of guilt then, because you've got my son as well.
Mm.
So I have that feeling that every parent that has multiple kids starts to have is, am I showing them enough love? We had all this one-on-one time together that we don't have now. And I look at it, I look at me prior to children now and go, oh, I totally was riddled with anxiety, but just had enough distractions to get on with it and not spend the time to work on that side of my mental health. But the sleep deprivation just kicked it into another gear. Like I've probably told the story before that it's just going to sound a bit morbid. I remember saying to my husband that you're going to need to take her to a hairdresser if she starts school, if I'm not around, because I was convinced that I was going to get sick and not be there to watch my kids grow up, because you can't do her hair like that for her
So
to
like
go to school.
the biggest concern that you have is if you die and you're not there to parent them, somebody needs to look after that child's appearance.
Yeah,
Because I don't think
I've
you've
seen
got
the
it
way
in
you
you,
do
hun.
hair, and it's not good. And just things like that now I think, why was that not a flag in myself? But luckily it was a flag for him. But just, I fronted up at the doctor's surgery at, 8 o'clock at night saying I'm having a heart attack. And the lovely doctor said to me, I think you might be having a panic attack. And then he actually was the one that said to me, how much sleep are you getting?
Yeah.
And that's when it spiraled from there, and I just burst into tears. And luckily he was a lovely, great doctor that cared and put me on the right track to talk to people about how that works and to stop, again, this guilt of accepting help. So we then put a bit of a plan in place that she would go, my kids would have a sleepover at my mum's, which I'm so fortunate to have, but just to get that sleep bank built back
Yeah.
up, because you can only function on next to nothing for so long before the wheels fall off the cart.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, we have this, I don't know what it is, but for some reason we have this thing that I need to keep going and I need to be Superwoman and I need to do everything.
Other people can do this, why can't I?
Yeah. And we're comparing ourselves, we compare our reality to the glossy version that people put on social media.
Yeah, disclaimer, no one else can do it perfectly.
Yeah, no, exactly that. Nobody else is Supermum either. And, I juggle quite a few things, and people go, oh, you're Superwoman. No, I'm really, really, really not. And it's not helpful for anybody to think that. It's not helpful for me to think it, and it's not helpful for that to be a comparison. Like, I can't clean.
You gave me that analogy that, like they're all, you're juggling balls, some are glass balls, some are plastic. And people need to realise that in order for what you might see on the outside as happening and everything's great and look at this amazing life I've got, there's other stuff that has to stop in the background for that to work. So like you say, at the moment, if I even think about the state that my house is in, I just can't. But so that has fallen off because coming to work's my priority. And so, like, it's the same with having children. There's priorities and there's things that can just wait. Yeah, but you know what shouldn't wait? Sleep. So if your baby is sleeping, sleep. Yeah. And I got so stuck in that whole thing of, why would people say that? Well, I need to get the cleaning done. No, I don't.
No, you don't. No. I often tell new mums, so wherever your level of, cleanliness is at the moment, or wherever, we just need to drop it down a couple of notches, and then drop it down again, and one more time. Yeah. And depending on where you're at, you may need to go for a fourth time as well. And then maybe when they get to about 18, you can start thinking about bringing it back up again.
I think, when are they going to start picking their stuff up? But
I read something today that was about, rules for being a teenager, and one of it was things like if you fold a towel in exactly the right way, it will stay wet forever. Or, tips to using a laundry hamper, drop your clothes next to it, and those kinds of things. So, you know what? I'm very nearly 40 and I'm guilty of some of those things on that list. Because it's just...
I think that the only thing that, as experience is what teaches us, isn't it? So, hindsight's great, but hindsight means going back, knowing what you knew then.
Yeah.
So we don't get afforded the opportunity to go back knowing what we know now. And as my kids get older, I'm realising, you know what, they'll be fine and they'll get through this. And then I wish that I could have a way to share that with new mums, that it will be okay.
Yeah.
And this stage you're going through now is really bloody difficult. And if someone offers to help, accept it. Yeah. And also
ask for it.
I know it sucks having to ask for it, but those friends that send you that lovely, let me know if there's anything I can do, don't be afraid to say, can you come and sit here for an hour and I just need to sleep.
100%. The other thing is, if you're the friend that's sending the message that says don't be afraid to ask for anything, know that people often won't ask.
Exactly.
So don't say, hey, if there's anything you need, drop around a basket of groceries. Go and say, right, I'm here, I'm holding the baby, it's my turn to hold the baby, go and have a shower. Or what load of laundry needs to go on. That kind of, so go and actually say, I'm here to help, this is what I've come to do. Because if you go, if there's anything you need, let me know. 90% of the time people aren't, and I've just pulled that statistic out of nowhere. But, in my experience, that's exactly right. But people often won't ask for help. But if you go around and say, right, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah. And on that as well, I think that we need to recreate that village or that sisterhood of stop worrying about if your friends come over and there's a basket of washing there, or if your house looks like it's lived in. Because guess what?
Yeah.
People live in your house. And that's okay.
Well, I see that as my public service.
Yeah.
So my house, I used to joke that I have chaos, which is can't have anyone over syndrome.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Because I was so worried about the state of my house, and I can't get my house to the state of cleanliness or tidiness that I want to in order to be able to have people over. So you know what? Actually, this is my public service of saying that my life is not Instagram ready. My life is not filled with shiny white surfaces and beautiful marble and all of those kinds of things. My life is filled with, there's a cardboard box that one of the dogs has destroyed, and there's dog hair because we can only vacuum so many times a day. And, the kids don't put their washing in the hamper, and there's often dishes on the, if you can see the kitchen bench, then that's a miracle.
Yes. I had a friend pop in the other day, and I almost went to apologise because I hadn't packed the dishwasher, and then I thought, no, because by doing that, I'm also letting her know that it's okay if I turn up at her house and it's not spotless.
Yeah.
But so what, I haven't had time to pack the dishwasher. I've also been doing 4 million other things, and that's life, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I really, that's something that I strongly, strongly believe in as a new mum. Just, you got to let that go. You've got to just, how you think back to, or not think back, but what houses do you feel welcome in when you walk in? You know, you walk into your parents' house and you feel like you're at home.
Yeah.
Or you've got that one friend that just goes, no, stuff it. This is my house, like it or not. They're the places you're going to feel most comfortable.
Yeah, not the ones where you're too afraid to walk. It's like, should I take my shoes off?
Yeah.
How do I ask if I should take my shoes off?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't feel comfortable here. And where do I put my mug?
Yeah, so just drop all of that. And I feel if I had have done that, my, you know, time at home with my babies and my postnatal anxiety and all those kind of things would have lessened a lot, and I would have enjoyed that time a bit more.
So what did postnatal anxiety feel like for you, look like for you?
It went from feeling like just a bit overly cautious or thinking a bit much to, again, this is probably a bit heavy, but sitting around the dining table thinking about what's going to happen if I'm not here, and not being, I really clearly remember not being able to take into conversation between my husband and my kids because my heart was just racing, and just a total lack of control, and Googling, because mine's health-based, so I would Google things like 50 times a day minimum about this pain or that, or what might be happening with my baby. Does that mean this? Things like SIDS I would be constantly fixated on, and it's not until that fog lifts that I can see how heavy that was and how much that was weighing me down.
And you make light of that now. You know, you'll turn
only
that
now
into...
that fog's lifted though.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I did is I didn't give people around me the opportunity to know that that's what was happening. I really carried a lot of that internally, and I think that's why I got to the point where I just went, you need to watch the kids, I'm going to the doctor. And I look at that now and just think how sad for me and for my husband and for my kids that that's where it had to get to, because had I known the impact that a conversation would have had earlier, I would have done it. But you know, sometimes you just can't know the impact.
You can't, that's exactly right. But sometimes when you have that conversation, I think there are people who try. You were exceptionally lucky that you had a GP that was onto it, and that could actually identify that and normalized it for you, and broke that down into how much sleep are you getting, and I think this is actually so lucky. I think if there's people out there, if you do go to your GP and you find that it's a GP that goes, because we hear it all the time. Well, babies don't sleep. Sleep deprivation is normal.
That's right. You think about how many GPs I would have been to prior to that night.
Yeah.
For checks for the babies, checks for the toddler, after checks for me.
Yeah.
And never.
So it's not, and so if go again, just keep going until you get help. And I've been the mum who's been labelled as a helicopter parent or neurotic. Perhaps I need medication because I'm neurotic over whatever it is. But keep going until you can find somebody who says to you, you know what, this is a safe space, and I'm gonna make this okay for you. Yeah. So in 100%. Whatever way that looks like.
Exactly, and I think I can only make light of it now and laugh about it now because I'm on the other side of it. But I feel like I have this little mission inside of me to just make sure that new mums and new dads know, exactly like you're saying, keep talking until someone listens. And it sucks that you have to do that, that the first person you get might not listen, but keep talking, because it doesn't have to feel so heavy, and so you don't have to have that feeling of dread. It's not how it has to be.
It's really not. And geez, that's not what we want our experience of parenthood to feel like, is it? I think as well, if you're a friend and you can see that one of your friends is struggling, actually ask them.
Yeah. And we were just talking about Are You Okay Day the other week. And that's the exact thing about how do you ask someone that. It sounds stupid, but it's as simple as asking them. Yeah. Because fear is a natural reaction that we all have, we live with, we're meant to have it. It means our bodies are doing what they're supposed to do, that we have that level of caution. But don't be afraid to ask that question. Because like I say, that doctor saying to me, how much sleep are you getting, that just unraveled the whole thing. And thank God he did. Yeah. That's it, because he could be in a very different situation now. Yeah.
I think as well that it's really important you don't want to alarm people, but to actually say to a friend or, your wife or a loved one or whatever, daughter, sister, auntie, next door neighbour, whatever that is, but hey, you know what? Maybe it's time to go and see a doctor.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to go and ask for some extra help.
Exactly. And you'd rather do that at a point sooner than later, like if you get to 18 months down the track, like I did, I just think, I wish that I had have just known to talk about it or had someone ask me.
Yeah.
Because if you're like I was, which to be honest I think most people are, you become quite good at hiding what it is 100%. That's going on.
Yeah.
And you might tell 10% of the story. So every so often
I'd
say to my husband, oh, what if this? And he'd say, oh, and like put a positive spin on it. But he's not to know that the other 90% of the time, my brain is consumed with that.
Yeah.
So I think if someone had have asked the question, even if they just thought, oh, I could be overreacting a little bit, but I'm going to ask. It's very valuable, and I think that shakes you into a reality that otherwise you're just stuck under that fog of cloud thinking, no, it's okay, tomorrow will be better.
Yeah.
But yes.
Or every parent worries about their child. Every parent worries what happens if I'm not here.
Yes.
So this is normal.
And also, there's parents that have got it so much worse than I do. I'm so fortunate. What about single parents? What about parents with children that have health issues? I don't have the right to feel this way.
Okay, so I'm likely to get on the soapbox. I'm going to try and pull myself back.
Too many people have that, and I just think that's not what it's about.
No, it's really not. And also, just because somebody has it harder than you doesn't make what you're going through any less hard.
Yeah, and we need to put that on signs everywhere.
On T-shirts. Honestly, it's not a competition. I think you said that before. It's not a competition of going, like I remember somebody saying to me, little boys, little problems, big boys, big problems.
Oh, they still say that.
Yeah, and why? What do you think you're going to achieve by that?
All you're doing is making that person feel like there is no end in sight.
Yeah, well, not only that, but you're going, do you know what, this feels really big for me at the moment, and I've just been told by somebody that actually what I'm experiencing doesn't warrant the way that I'm feeling.
Totally diminished how I'm feeling.
You cannot feel wrong.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure there's a better way to put that, but you can't experience wrong emotions. Whatever you're feeling is okay. If you're struggling, ask for help. But we don't do that. But don't help somebody by trying to diminish it and going, well, wait till they're teenagers.
Yeah, that's right.
Because if you think you've got problems now.
Yeah. And I think when I'd gone to the medical appointments for both of my children, I definitely carried that in that, like, well, I'm here I need to make sure the babies are okay.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel like not that anyone made me feel that way, but I didn't really feel like I had the right to go, look, I don't know what it is I'm feeling, but I just feel off.
Yeah.
Because, I've got these healthy, beautiful babies and aren't I lucky and, rah, rah, rah. So even if you can't figure out what it is that feels off, even saying that, like if we have people come into our centre that say, I don't know what it is, I just feel a bit off. Yeah. There's amazing people that can help. They really can ask the questions to help you figure out what it is that's going on. Yeah.
And that's it. You don't have to be able to put a label on it.
And it doesn't I wouldn't have been able to.
And it doesn't need a label. I know for some people they find labels really useful, but for other people not so much. It doesn't need a label. It can just be, this is feeling really tricky at the moment and I'd like it not to feel as tricky as this.
Exactly.
So now I know that you have to go and pick up your children, so we're going to wrap this up. So 2 things. Firstly is that you very briefly shared your birth stories. Thank you for doing that. We are trying to create a space where people can do that as well. So if people who are listening, if you would like to write your birth story or record it or, do a voice recording or a face recording or just type it out, then feel free to send that through to info@whws.org.au and we'll make sure that we can collate all of those and have a space where we can have birth certificates.
I'll type mine out so you can get all the gruesome bits out.
Yes, please do. I'm just writing down, don't forget to add birth stories to the show notes. And is there anything else that you would like to share before we finish up?
I think, like I briefly touched on, something changed in me as I started to feel better as my daughter got a bit older, and my personality has gone from someone that just would be quite private to now someone that
talks about their birth story on air. people literally all over the world to hear. Thanks, Kate.
You're welcome. To now someone that is willing to talk about my situation and ask questions of other people, because I truly believe that it does help. And so I guess I'll just jump on my soapbox a bit for a second and ask people to do the same thing as well, is don't be afraid to share either how you're feeling or your experience before, because we learn from our elders and the way that they've lived through things. And I think if you can share that for other people, it can just really help.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think normalizing,
that's the word.
Yeah. I think those shared experiences, and there are stories that do need to be told. There are stories that need to be heard. There are experiences. We don't have to do it all ourselves. So, we don't have to make the mistakes ourselves. We can learn from other people's experiences. And but really, I think feeling isolated, feeling like you're the only person who has ever sat down and thought, if I die, somebody else needs to do my daughter's hair. Like, as much as we can
I laugh about it
now.
That I spent too much time thinking about things like that.
But how isolating to think, well, I'm the only person that's experiencing this. I've got nobody else to talk to about it. It's really empowering for other people who are going through something similar, but they're keeping it behind closed doors. It's really empowering for them to hear that actually I'm not alone in this. Other people have experienced this before, and they've experienced it for, there are multiple women who've experienced it over the past 50 years who have done it longer. So to know that you're not alone, and that you do have a beautiful relationship with your daughter, and she's now 6, and you're not still in that hole.
Exactly. You don't have to sit in that hole forever. And we've talked about the feelings and that you're not alone, but I suppose the practicalities of that as well, in go and chat to your GP, go and keep chatting to GPs until you find someone who will listen. Or, I like to offer, like we were saying before, about the solution of where do you go to. And I suppose the GP is probably a starting point, or your child health nurses. Yeah,
and I will actually often say to people when they'll call up here, have you been and had blood tests done? Before, I think we're, with people, particularly in the perinatal period, we're very quick to go, oh, well, okay, postnatal anxiety, postnatal depression. Sometimes it can be as simple, but, sometimes it can be really low iron or really low B12 or something like that.
And it's just practical, useful information.
Yeah.
And I think
go get a checkup. Get all of that done, and then, while you're waiting for that, see about accessing some additional supports as well.
And if you're like I was in that period, you'll build that conversation up in your head 100 times before you actually go to the doctor. But just don't worry about it. Just get in there, rip the Band-Aid off. It's 30 seconds of you saying, I'm not feeling great. Can you do some blood tests and tell me what's going on? And then you're done. That's it. You've done the hardest part.
Yeah, that's it. And as you say, I think that you don't have to do this alone, and a really good starting point is your GP.
Yeah, and keep going until you find a good one.
That's it. There's got to be some good ones out there, right?
There's plenty. You might even find the one that helped me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for giving up your afternoon to come and record this with me, Kate. I really, really appreciate it. And we will put in the show notes about where people can send through their birth stories. Yep. And thank you very much for all of your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me for today's episode of A Hidden World of Women, a podcast brought to you by Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. For more information on the services we offer, head to whws.org.au or Women's Health and Wellbeing Services on YouTube and social media. Looking forward to the next episode where we uncover the hidden world of women.